lot of misconceptions around how we get bags under our eyes. I always assume it's they're stressed and they haven't been sleeping.
So I did research to look into this, and a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually...
Really? So if I never want to get bags under my eyes again, what is the natural, easy solution?
Try this.
Dr. Joseph Allen is the board-certified eye doctor,
helping millions of people understand eye health and unlocking the secrets behind achieving sharper and healthier vision.
I really want to talk to you about so many misconceptions because I don't know what's true.
Sure.
Okay, so my vision loss being inevitable. Is that true?
Unfortunately, there are changes that occur with age that will change your eyesight and vision. But there's a lot of things that can help prevent and slow down progression, and we'll go into them.
And then every once in a while, my eyelid starts twitching. What is that?
Eyelid myokymia. So that is your threshold of your stress. Get more sleep and stop drinking so much caffeine.
What about blue light? Is that harmful?
The blue light that comes from your digital screens has consistently shown in research to not increase the risk of aging eye diseases. And research on using blue light glasses shows that it could just be placebo effect. But if you're worried about how blue light's affecting you, just moving your phone back twice as far will decrease your blue light exposure by 75%.
And more people are starting to care about their eye health than ever before. But is our eye health getting better or worse?
Worse. For example, right now, about 30% of the world's population is nearsighted, but by about 2050, we will have about 50% of being nearsighted because of our lifestyle.
So how much screen time being indoors, reading books up close is okay?
It depends on age. So,
question. If you could sit at a table with any 4 guests from the Diary of a CEO, who would you choose? Here's a challenge for the entire Diary of a CEO community. If we hit 10 million subscribers by the end of 2024, you will get to pick 4 guests for your dream conversation, and you can make it weird or you can make it wonderful. And here is the best part. 3,000 of you that subscribe will be invited to join this conversation live, in person, and for free. Subscribe now, and let's make this happen together. Who are you? What do you do? And I think most importantly of all, why is it so important that you do it?
I am a doctor of optometry. I am a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, and I am a diplomat of the American Board of Optometry. So I practice eye care here in the US, and I see patients for all sorts of eye conditions, whether that be diagnosing, managing, anything from vision problems simply as like nearsightedness or astigmatism, to fitting contact lenses, to diagnosing different diseases in the back of the eye, and then prescribing medications or therapy to try and prevent that from getting worse or to help treat it. On top of all of this, I also host on various social media channels, a educational website about helping people learn about the eyes, their vision, and finding the best vision products. And that really falls back to my mission of just helping people see their very best today, but also keeping them see their best tomorrow.
And when you think about where we are as humans as it relates to our eye health, like what's the macro picture? Like what's going on? I don't know whether it's just because I'm getting older, but I'm wondering if more people are starting to care about their eye health than ever before, and if they are, why? And is our eye health getting better or worse?
I want to say that I think people generally are being more interested in eyes and vision. Unfortunately, part of that is probably because they're noticing more problems, right? People are starting to notice dysfunctions or more problems with their eye strain. They're noticing more problems with dry eye. Children are starting to become nearsighted faster and to greater degrees. And because of those factors, we're also seeing a lot more eye health conditions in the back of the eye. That also is reflected with other metabolic diseases like diabetes. Significantly causes damage and leads to potential blindness inside the eye. So there's a lot of factors to it.
What's changing? You know, you referred to some of the situations there as becoming more or worse, etc. That would suggest that there's something environmental or within our lifestyle that's having an impact on that.
So again, there's many factors that go into it. Certainly, just having an aging population, our population, a lot of people are starting to move into older age groups. We also have aftermath of poor diet a lot of people with diabetes, high blood pressure, and all these other conditions that cause ripple effects down the road. And then our society has changed, especially in the form of lifestyle, beyond diet. Also, what we do throughout the day. How much time do we spend on devices up close? How much of our society is focused on education? And how much time do we spend indoors? All of these things are pushing us to, as a society, to have different changes within the eye and increase our risk for diseases and potential vision loss.
Why does it matter? I ask that question because I think for people to spend time listening to all the education you give out, they first have to really believe that their eyes matter. And I know this sounds like a bit of a crazy question because we all can understand that seeing things is useful, but sometimes in life I think we don't appreciate things until we lose them. And I think in your line of work, you must see that more than ever, no pun intended.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct. And it's so frustrating as an eye care provider of how many patients or how many people just come in because they finally notice something's wrong. And usually by the time something's wrong, they notice it, it's already too late. And so one of the best things I can recommend for anybody is to, whether you think you have a problem with your vision, because a lot of people are like, I see great, I see fine, I don't need to see an eye doctor. It's like, no, you absolutely need to. There's so many different, not only just problems with your eyesight that we can catch, but there's over 270 different conditions, systemic and vision conditions, that an eye doctor can diagnose from just one of the simplest, non-invasive medical evaluations. And that's just getting an eye exam every year.
Give me some examples of how conditions you've spotted by doing an eye exam.
So patients who don't know they're diabetic will catch diabetes by looking inside the eye, because diabetes will cause damage to the blood vessels, and we can see bleeding happening in the retinal tissue. We can see high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I've had patients where I've caught that they've technically had little strokes already inside, because just looking inside the eye itself can have a stroke. We can see cholesterol plaques stuck in the arteries within the eye. Autoimmune conditions, we'll catch those from doing an eye exam. Unfortunately, things like brain tumors and conditions like multiple sclerosis, we'll catch those. I had one story I'll share. I have one patient she was young. She was 20 years old, college student. She came in for just getting new glasses, contact lenses. She has to go to school, she has to see well. And during that very routine exam, she has no other problems. I'm looking inside the eye and I can see a hemorrhage, a blood spot. But there's different types of hemorrhaging that occurs in the back of the eye. This specific type of hemorrhage is called a Roth spot. And typically we only see Roth spots if somebody has a more serious condition going on.
Can you show me on that where you saw it? Sorry.
So
For people that aren't watching and just listening on audio, we have a model of an eye here.
So with the model of the eyeball, during the exam, we of course look through the cornea, through the pupil. Usually we dilate the pupils. If I was to open up the inside of the eye, the orange part that you see here, that's the retinal tissue. And you can see the little red lines, those are blood vessels. Mm-hmm. The eyeball is kind of beautiful because it has a dual blood supply. So it actually has blood that comes through the back and supplies the retina from the backside, but then it has blood vessels that go within the retina and supply nutrients within the retina from the front side. So this type of bleeding spot was occurring just right here in the back of the eye, a little bit off angle, but it was occurring there. And I was like, this should not be there, especially for somebody that was healthy, had no other issues.
What sort of age?
She was 20-year-old female college student. And usually, again, we see Roth spots in more serious conditions, whether somebody's extremely diabetic or they have HIV. Something's going on. So I said, this is not right. We need to do blood work. So I ended up referring her, requested a blood panel. And she didn't have like a family doctor, so I'm like, okay, we need to refer you, but she's heading out to college. So I'm like, I'm gonna give you my full report. I need you to go get this done. And then COVID happened. So I didn't hear anything. And so finally, a few weeks later, They finally allowed doctors to go back into clinics for emergency care in case I had an emergency. And I called up that patient. I'm like, I just wanted to check on her, see, hey, what's going on? Did you have to get that blood work? And she's like, you saved my life. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, a few days later, I started feeling really tired and not feeling well. So I went into the doctor and I brought your report. They did blood work. They found out they put her in intensive care unit for 3 days because they were worried she was going to bleed out. Her platelets were so low that she could have just bled there from doing the blood work. She had an immunothrombocytopenic purpura. So her immune system, because of probably a virus, but her immune system was attacking her platelets.
Platelets are the thing that sort of clots the blood, right?
Correct. And that ended up manifesting in the eye. So it was one of the few cases where I was like, wow. Like, otherwise, if she hadn't come in, what could have happened, right? So I just use that as a good demonstration because there's so many things that we catch on even a daily, weekly basis.
There's so many misconceptions around vision in the eye. I think one of the misconceptions I think I found myself living under is that my vision loss is inevitable, really irrespective of what I do. And the minute you start to believe that story, then it kind of disempowers you, but it takes away your motivation to do anything about your vision. Now, is that true?
There is changes that occur with age that will change your eyesight and vision. That some just fundamental facts that you don't really have supreme control over. It's like your hair growing gray. Mm-hmm. Like, it's gonna happen. It's kind of accepted. Yeah, with older age, you're gonna have gray hair. Mm-hmm. With the eye, there's conditions like that, like cataracts, age-related cataracts, eventually will develop. Presbyopia, that's the condition where people are in their 40s and early 50s. They start having a hard time seeing up close, mm-hmm. and they have to push things further back, and they start wearing bifocals or varifocals. So those sort of conditions inevitably do happen. But there are, thankfully, a lot of things in our lifestyle that research is paying more attention to that can help hopefully prevent and even slow down the progression of more devastating, blinding eye diseases. Mm. So there are things you can do and be aware of, and happy to go into that.
So, global eye health and the statistics. One of the really sort of shocking stats I read is that most of us are going to develop nearsightedness when you go into sort of 2050, 2060. Mm-hmm. Is that true? What are the stats around that?
So a publication came out in 2016 in Ophthalmology, author of Holden. They looked at the statistics of myopia or nearsightedness. Even going further back, we've known that nearsightedness is progressing. And now between around it's estimated that right now about 30% of the world's population is nearsighted. But by about 2050, we will have about 50% of the entire world's population being nearsighted. In the US right now, for kids aged 5 to 19, we're already about 42%. And by 2030, so in just a few years, it's expected in the US will be about that 50% mark. And then other parts of the world, like East Asia, like in Japan, it's closer to 80 to 90% people are already nearsighted.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How come?
There's certainly genetics plays a role. As more research has come out, we know that genetics only plays up to about 30% of the factor. So if your parents are nearsighted, or if somebody's severely nearsighted, like if your mom's severely nearsighted, you are a much higher risk of developing it. But the key other factors of lifestyle falls down to urbanization, really the fact that if you go outside in a big city that has streets really close to each other, you're not really in an open field, right? You have big, tall buildings right next to you. And then you go inside and you're inside of a smaller building, a smaller apartment. Then there's the fact that we spend so much emphasis in our society on education, on being up-close beings, right? Kids now are not only pushed to excel in education and being introduced to education earlier and to spend more time studying and learning, but parents are giving their kids digital devices as the babysitter 2.0, right? So kids are staring at tablets even from a very young age. And then it's the amount of time we're spending indoors.
It's interesting because I don't even think most people realize that the way we live our lives, the things we stare at, being indoors can change the eye. I think we all kind of operate under this assumption that our eyes are just our eyes. And we think of muscles as being trainable and exercisable. You know, I can go to the gym, I lift a weight, my muscle changes. But my eye changing is something that I think is quite an surprising concept to most people. How do we know this?
So statistically, we've watched and data collected for many decades, watching people gradually become more and more nearsighted. And there's been those theories of why that could happen. The evidence of what changes physiologically with the eyeball is that the eye, as you grow and go through adolescence and your body's growing, the eyeball actually grows backward toward the brain, into the orbit eye socket, a little bit. And it doesn't need to change much. The eye growing 1 millimeter, just 1 millimeter, will change your prescription for glasses by about 3 diopters, which is a high amount. So if somebody gets 2 millimeters of change, that is already into what we classify as severe myopia, which carries a high risk for eye diseases like glaucoma, cataracts, having a retinal detachment where the retina in the back of the eye peels off the back of the globe, and then what's called myopic maculopathy, which is a form of kind of macular degeneration that typically occurs with later age.
And that 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter growth is linked to lifestyle.
The vast majority of it.
How much screen time, how much being indoors, how much reading books up close is okay? Like, is there like a recommended daily allowance?
So there are some recommendations put forth by like the American Academy of Pediatrics. And it depends a little bit on age, especially for young kids. I think for the first few years of life, they don't recommend kids look at screens at all. And then why? Because again, there's research showing that not just for eye development, but also neurological development. And I'm not a specialist on that form of pediatric brain development, so I can't really opine on that. But there are recommendations for it. And I encourage anybody who's listening, if you have a young child, if you're thinking about having a child, definitely look into those recommendations because it has impacts on your child's development and growth. As far as like adults, like you and I are both in our 30s, how much time is spending on like looking up close? Once you're past the age of like 20, 25, the rate of myopia development thankfully slows down.
That's nearsightedness.
Nearsightedness, correct.
Yeah.
That does slow down, but about 10% of the population can still develop a stronger and stronger prescription. And part of that, again, is your education and how much time you're spending indoors and on near devices. There have been numerous studies looking at outdoor time and that spending more time outside can offset the onset and progression of nearsightedness. Most studies are quoting somewhere around 90 minutes to 2 hours a day can kind of offset all the near work that children are using.
So spending sort of 90 minutes to 2 hours a day outside looking far.
That's a part of it. The various studies do look at, are they doing things up close while they're outside, or is it just being outside? It's not fully understood. Is it sunlight? Is it the brightness of light outside? Is it the individual specific wavelengths of sunlight that are somehow communicating to the back of the eye to grow or not? There's also the thought that the way the world around us focuses on the retina when we're outside may send a different signal to the back of the eye. Because one of the areas that they've done so much research on in terms of how myopia progresses has to do with how light is focusing on different parts of the retina. I do want to just step back when it comes to all the spending time outside. It's, again, that research is largely based on surveys, and so they aren't 100% sure how much light outdoor time people are really getting. So now they're utilizing health trackers and giving it to kids for those studies so they can track truly how much light they're getting when they're stepping outside versus not, so they can have a better objective data to really understand the risk of myopia progression based on that.
I was wondering if vitamin D plays a role at all there.
That's also theorized and looked at in some studies. Also just athletics and getting more motion in a daily activities. So there's many different studies in those regards. But right now, even a study out of Taiwan, they've been implementing a policy. It's like, hey, you have to get at least 90 minutes to 2 hours outside every single day. And they have noticed over the last decade there has been a decrease in childhood myopia development. There's still some debate if it helps slow down progression, because even a more recent meta-analysis said it wasn't statistically significant for the progression of myopia, but it does delay onset of myopia.
Can you reverse myopia?
No.
Okay, so if I become nearsighted because of my lifestyle or some other reason, I can't then just spend loads of time outside and reverse it and start gazing off into the distance, etc.
So there's the understanding of what true myopia is. And again, that has to do with the elongation of the eyeball. So if you were to somehow find a way to truly reverse myopia, you would have to find a way to somehow shift that part of the eye forward, which we have not been able to do. I know, just being in the world of social media, there are people who will claim that they've done this using various things. Usually these people who are claiming this are selling something that is not based on science. That is, and doing a research study to prove that would be very easy to do. And it doesn't show. Most people, if they are spending more time outside, or they are doing eye exercises of any form to try and reverse their nearsightedness, what they're going through is that they have something called pseudomyopia, which is where they've overused their eye muscles so much that they're more or less having a spasm, and their muscle is making them think that they are nearsightedness. But then finally going outside, spending more time outside, stop staring at their phone so much, they learn to relax their eye muscles, and all of a sudden now they can see better again.
Well, this is, in part one of my personal concerns, because sometimes, very rare occasions, I'll spend maybe 9, 10, 12 hours in this studio. And, I'm doing research on the guest before the guest arrives, and then we're sitting at this sort of distance, and I'm very intently focused, and it's a dark room, etc. And then when I walk outside, it's like I can't see a bloody number plate, and I think I'm losing my vision. But from what you're saying there, it sounds like I'm going through a bit of pseudomyopia.
You could be. Of course, I haven't done an eye exam on you. I don't know where you're at. Can I ask, when was the last time you had your eyes checked?
No comment. It was a long time ago, and the reason for that is, again, because I always assume my eyes were fine. So it would have been, gosh, that's such a good question. Maybe 7 years ago or something. So
it's tough to say. There is possibility that maybe there's a little bit of nearsightedness there. It could be that you've used your eye muscles so much indoors that you're used to lifting it. Think of it like lifting a 5-pound weight, right? You've held it there all day long, and most people can. Eventually, if you hold it there long enough, you can have some eye strain, and people will feel that at the end of the day. But then you step outside, and you're just used to holding that 5-pound weight at arm's level. So you have to learn to, hey, I can relax this and put it back down. So that is a component of the internal eye muscle called the ciliary body, which unfortunately is not the same type of muscle as your skeletal muscle. And so even with eye exercises, you can't strengthen that muscle.
So eye exercises don't work?
Eye exercises in the form of what's called vision therapy or orthoptics can work, but they're not building the muscle. They are improving the really the coordination of your brain communicating that information to those muscles to work in coordination.
Okay.
And so there's some certain binocular vision disorders, like people who have convergence insufficiency, they can't move their eyes to bring them forward to keep a page in front of them single, or some people have loss of their accommodative ability, their ability to change focus to keep something up close clear. Those type of binocular vision issues can be trained, again, through the training of the communication between the brain and those muscles.
Should I be looking for clues as to what the future of my vision is going to be like from my parents? Because my parents they hold everything at like 1 meter length from their face. And when I was younger, I used to take the piss out of them thinking like, that's so ridiculous. And I would show them that I could read from like 1 centimeter away and they're reading at arm's length. But I think they're going to have the last laugh when I get to 50, 60 years old.
Sure.
Because of genetics or whatever.
So again, even without genetics, just the way the eye ages, the lens inside of your eye will change.
Which is?
So if I open up the eye model here, let me try not to spill everything from the inside of the eye. In the front portion of the eye, you have the cornea.
Which is that the very front piece?
It's the clear window to the eye.
Okay.
Behind it, of course, you have the iris, the colored part of the eye, so brown eyes, blue eyes. Behind that, you have a lens. It's called the crystalline lens. And this has got a couple of different pieces. I'll set those to the side. But this crystalline lens is actually about the size of an M&M. If I put these together, it's kind of that shape. When you're born, this lens is clear and thin. And so the muscle inside the eye actually pulls on this lens to change its shape. And that's what helps you as a little kid see all the way toward the front of your nose. As you get older, this lens gains an extra layer basically every year of your life. And so as you get older, if you ever look up on images online, you can actually see rings or these little lines. And it's like looking at the rings of a tree. So you can basically count those and be like, oh, look how old this person is. So by the time everybody's about in their early 40s, there's algorithms that predict this with high accuracy. And in school, I had memorized them. I don't really need to use them as much anymore, so I haven't thought about it for a while. But as this lens gets thicker, it basically gets thicker every year. It gets to a point where the crystals within that lens start to change shape. They become more crystallized, rigid. And so even though the muscle inside the eye is still pulling on this lens, it's like pulling on a hard, stiff marble. It doesn't want to change shape anymore. And so that's why people can gradually I can't quite keep things as clear anymore. And so it's gradually getting worse and worse.
Okay.
Eventually, once you get closer to the ages of 50, 60, 70, 80, this lens continues to get thicker, harder, but then the crystals start to change color. They go from being clear to being more of a faint yellow color to a darker yellow, whitish color. And that's what we call a cataract. And so people lose vision because that cataract is such a dense color that light is not filtering, it's not passing through to getting to the retina in the back of the eye anymore.
So what'd you do, cut it out?
So thankfully, cataract surgery is an amazing surgery. I think it's probably one of the more fascinating surgeries that's out there. What modern cataract surgery does, they either use a laser or they physically have to open up parts of the eye, but they use a procedure called phacoemulsification. It's basically using ultrasound to shatter the lens into dust. And then they have a small vacuum tube that sucks up all the particles out of the eye. But then a new plastic lens is inserted into the eye, into that place, and that new plastic lens can be made to account for any glasses prescription that you need.
Okay.
And what's fascinating for you and I is that, so this form of cataract surgery has been evolving and getting better and better over generations, but the new lens implants that they've been engineering are just outstanding, even right now. Because now they can make multifocal lenses. They can have lenses that change shape based on how you're using your eyes. And then it's basically not needing bifocals, not needing glasses as much, in some cases, if at all. And so I keep on thinking like, wow, where this technology is right now, where is it going to be in 30, 40 years when you and I are getting to that point where we might need to think about it? Who knows what we're going to have?
I reckon we'll have like cameras.
I hope so.
Do you know what I mean? Are people working on that kind of thing? I bet someone's working on some kind of camera, electric eyeball.
You know, I did hear of some research maybe about 5-6 years ago of somebody talking about it, but since then, I think things have kind of gone quiet. They are probably in the last year, one of the last few years, there's been interest and research into making like augmented reality contact lenses that are quite fascinating. And then there is the kind of one of the newest things is the first whole eye transplant. That was one of the kind of the coolest things that have come up recently.
There was an eye transplant.
So a gentleman was injured he was U.S. military, but something happened on the job, electrical damage to his face, his eye. He ended up having partial face transplant and then a whole eye transplant. And at this time, it was the first one ever done. The eye is so unique and so complex that when they finally did this transplant, it's sort of shaken the eye care world a little bit. I just read like a publication in JAMA that was basically summarizing what it's been like after this last year. And it's amazing because the eye did connect to the optic nerve, because the eye, again, is so complex. So they had to not only connect muscles to the eyeball, but they had to connect the optic nerve from the donor tissue to the host. And keeping the right amount of blood supply, having it so it didn't reject, is a really tough feat. And what they have now, they find that this last paper I just read, that the eye is still doing well. It's still got blood flow. It's making aqueous humor, the kind of the clear blood within the eye. And through functional MRIs and electroretinograms that we can do in the clinic, they have been able to show that there is electrical activity going to the patient's brain. Unfortunately, he does not have any eyesight, or he cannot detect light with it, but I think just this is the first step of showing like, wow, we actually can try this. We can get it so it actually is safe. So it's pretty fascinating.
God, it's only going to be a matter of time, isn't it? You said there that the eye is complex. I was reading some stats around the eye. That blew my mind. The eye contains over 2 million working parts and is considered the second most complex organ in the body. I guess the brain is the first.
And the eyeball is really an extension of the brain.
Right.
The retina in the back of the eye communicates directly through the optic nerve to many parts of the brain.
Your eyes are capable of processing 36,000 pieces of information an hour. Your eyes will process 24 million images throughout your lifetime, contributing to 85% of your total knowledge. And there's a common saying that the eye is a window to your soul, showing how the eyes are so expressive that they can reveal a lot about a person's inner state, which we talked about a second ago. But it's just crazy that that particular stat around 85% of my total knowledge will basically come from my eye. When you say it, I kind of understand it because, okay, I'm reading, I'm seeing, I'm learning through my eyeballs, but it is cause for protecting our eyes. And the things you've described there, cataracts and these other sort of eye conditions, cataracts in particular, is that something that I can stave off by making better choices with my life?
So people who do smoke, people who drink more, that increases their oxidation. So the cataract formation mostly occurs due to oxidative stress within the eye. In fact, the most vitamin C in the body is within the eye, and it's in a solution that bathes around that lens and helps prevent it from oxidizing. So best things is try not to smoke, drinking, not to do too much. The sunlight does play a role in aging of the lens. And so there's epidemiological studies on age-related eye diseases that have found that people who spend more time outdoors without sunlight protection, without wide-brim hats, without sunglasses, they are more likely to develop conditions like cataracts. there's different types of cataracts. There's one specific type of cataract called a cortical cataract that kind of looks like bicycle spokes. If you were looking in the eye like I do in the exam room, you can see these bicycle spokes, and those have been found to be more related to UV light exposure. And then as far as taking supplements, vitamins, those sort of things, because things like vitamin C are a water-soluble vitamin, once you have enough vitamin C in your body, you just urinate out everything else. So there have been studies on people who are malnourished and don't get enough vitamin C that giving them vitamin C can help slow or delay the onset of cataracts. But if you already are getting proper nutrition, taking additional vitamin C is probably not going to delay your onset of cataracts specifically.
I learned something from you, actually, from your Instagram, which I think is really going to do me a lot of favors, because I'm someone that spends a lot of time on my phone, admittedly. And you alerted me to the fact that there's actually a feature in the iPhone which will help me stave off my myopia potentially.
Perhaps. So thankfully, again, the eye care community is not the only people who are aware of these issues with using devices up close. But thankfully, whether it be Apple specifically with their iPhone, but also the other phone manufacturers, people who are making these devices,